Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. First graphic we have up is the breakup map, and you can see the North Slope rivers, Colville, Sagwan, still mostly ice there, and really not expected to change any through the weekend, with the temperatures generally remaining below freezing up there. And then to the south, the Noatak, Kobuk rivers have some open areas, and the Noatak actually mostly open on the upper stretch there. And slow breakup will continue through the weekend for those rivers. And then southern rivers, Yukon River, of course, Kuskokwim River open. Yukon River there at Monic has a flood advisory out, and that's mostly for snow melt and not for any ice jamming that's occurring there. And that's out for the next, through tomorrow. And otherwise, river breakup about done for the remainder of the state. And for the next graphic here showing Dead Horse at midday today, they were a lot breezier and chillier than the other areas of the North Slope and Arctic coast up there, with temperatures about 24 degrees with east winds 25 to 30 miles an hour, or west winds 25 to 30 miles an hour. And visibility is occasionally down to a mile, light snow and fog there. Next graphic showing the contrast, go to the far western Arctic coast, or actually around the bend a little bit there to Point Hope. And 37 degrees there with ceilings, visibility is unlimited, maximum sunshine, northeast winds of 15 to 25 miles an hour there. And that offshore flow is what helped clear the skies out there, resulting in the sunshine. And for the next chart, heading down south, or the next photograph here showing Kodiak State Airport. They're looking southwest, and you can see a lot of clouds, low clouds, fog, light rain, northeast winds 10 to 20 miles an hour with light rain, but rainfall amount's pretty light, 0.02 of an inch. And about picture time here, visibility is down to near a mile and a half. In the fog has improved since then. And now for the fire danger chart. Areas of fire danger now on the increase, especially around the greater Fairbanks area and up along the upper Yukon River, over the Yukon Flats. And you can see areas of high fire danger extending westward across the Koyukuk, Kobuk Valley, right into the Seward Peninsula. And also around the Palmer area, I've got high fire danger, and the eastern Copper River Basin there in the valley, as well as Kenai Peninsula, increasing fire danger there, and northeast Bristol Bay, and even down the coastline toward Pilot Point, high fire danger. And from there, we're going on to satellite imagery. You can see clouds associated with a trough in southeast flow from Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula, on up across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, and then mostly sunny skies across south central and eastern interior Alaska. But there is a batch of clouds that produced some scattered showers earlier today from Yakutat to Middleton Island and along the southern Kenai Peninsula areas to Kodiak Island. Again, Kodiak Island seeing the fog and low clouds and thick dew, resulting in 0.02 of an inch of precipitation in the last 12 hours. Front bringing some breezy conditions and rain and fog to the western Aleutians, about 8 on west. Not too bad over the Panhandle, some sunshine there, and showers mostly staying to the east there in Canada, and some shower activity trying to develop over the eastern interior in some cloudy skies, but really not much happening at this point in time. You can see a band of clouds pushing southward, high pressure north of Wrangel Island continuing to circulate cold air southward, and you can see mostly higher clouds there, along with the lower clouds coming down toward the Arctic coast, and that's kicking the west winds up, especially on the east side there a little bit, keeping the light snow and fog conditions with IFR up in that area, with the clouds southward to about Arctic Village, and then south of there, mostly sunny skies and VFR. On the chart, you can see the area of light snow and fog, eastern Arctic coast there, associated with that weak trough. Otherwise, back to the west, higher pressure and over the central north slope, and that producing that offshore flow, bringing the sunshine to the northwest coast, again from Point Hope down into Kotzebue and the Selkirk Valley area, mostly sunny skies over the interior areas, isolated showers possibly trying to develop along the Alaska Range, maybe the Talkeetna Mountains, but mostly staying east of the border there for the Copper River Basin, staying east of the Wrangell Mountains. Very weak low there just south of Cordova or so. That did earlier on produce a few scattered showers, but nothing significant, just cloudy skies or partly cloudy skies this afternoon. Variable clouds for the Kenai Peninsula along the south coast there, and some isolated showers trying to develop, but none had hit the reporting stations that I saw along the Panhandle, with partly mostly sunny skies in some areas, a few more clouds in other locations, and generally cloudy for the Alaska Peninsula with some light rain, fog, and drizzle there. More extensive area of rainfall associated with that front south of the western Aleutians from Adak out toward Shemya, and tonight that'll continue, try to push in toward Atka, but not quite make it. It'll be breezy with occasional rain and fog. IFR conditions there from Adak westward until you reach the Komodorskis. And a trough keeps some light rain, fog, and drizzle from the Yukon Delta coast of Nunivak Island on down south across the Alaska Peninsula, maybe catching Unalaska to a lesser extent. Pribilof stayed dry with light winds and mostly cloudy skies. And trough, again, northerly flow keeping chilly and snowy conditions with areas of fog in over the north slope to the eastern Arctic coast. West side stays dry with partial clearing. Interior, dry, partial clearing, light winds, high pressure right over Cook Inlet results in light winds. Could be possibly some low clouds or fog forming over the inlet late tonight, but shouldn't amount to too much. Will be dry over the North Gulf Coast, scattered showers over the Wrangell Mountains there in the Copper River Basin, and should be partly clear, or at least partly cloudy over the Panhandle. Cloudy south with a chance of rain from Dixon Entrance, mostly from Heidelberg to Annette, Metlakatla, with that frontal boundary, and then that pulls off to the south, so it should be a dry day across all of southeast Alaska tomorrow with partly to mostly sunny skies in the afternoon. And again, moisture streaming westward increases the shower chance along with the clouds over the Copper River Basin and maybe the far eastern Tanana Valley, Northway Tok, and a risk of afternoon showers again with a few clouds to make the sky interesting over south central Alaska. And should be partly sunny, maybe some afternoon sunbreaks for Kodiak Island with variable clouds and a trough caught up in southeasterly flow. Keep shower chances from the Alaska Peninsula northward to the Pribilofs, Nunivak Island, maybe even St. Lawrence Island, and a day much like today for the Arctic coast and North Slope with the clouds and flurries on the east side, breezier with more sunshine from, say, Point Lay all the way down into Kotzebue Sound. And the front, again, edges its way eastward, so Adak and Atka, periods of light rain, fog, and drizzle, and stays pretty unsettled for the central and western Aleutians right through Sunday as that low center tracks up to somewhere between Adak and Atka, and the front advances eastward, so I'll bring some gusty winds, maybe 35 miles an hour for Cold Bay, less elsewhere, with light rain and fog for the western Alaska Peninsula, and again, unsettled conditions all the way out across all the southern Bering Sea. Looks like a better chance of rain for St. George and St. Paul, but look for an increase in the wind a little bit there. And showers should stay south of St. Lawrence Island, but showers and clouds on the increase as that boundary drops in and develops a little bit better with a weak low forming over Cook Inlet during the afternoon. So chance of showers, mostly cloudy skies, a little cooler from the Copper River Basin westward to the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta coastline. Kodiak, though, mostly sunny. Same for Bristol Bay, southeast coast, partly to mostly sunny. Showers staying in Canada. Lows for tonight, teens for the Arctic coast and North Slope, and mid-30s for the Brooks Range, and then mid to upper 30s for the interior. Warmer there over the lower Yukon River Valley areas to the southwest coast, mid to upper 40s, and then mid-30s for the Bering Sea. Lows mostly in the 40s for southern Alaska and the Panhandle, followed by highs in the upper 50s to upper 60s for the southeast coast, and mid 60s. So Sitna Valley areas of the Kenai Peninsula, Copper River Basin, lower to mid 60s, and a big area of 60s, 65 to 70 over the west part of the state, staying in the upper 20s for the North Slope and the Arctic coast for your highs, followed by lows back down to a shade below 20 degrees, 15 to 20, about covers it for the North Slope and Arctic coastal areas, lower to mid 30s in the interior, mid 40s in the southwest, followed by highs, again 60s western and southwest part of the states, the Sitna Valley with mid 20s for your highs for the North Coast and Arctic slope.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Okay, first line weather graphic for Saturday morning. IFR across the North Slope and the western Arctic coast, Brooks Range south, VFR, possible marginal VFR, Port Moller and Seldovia across Kamishak Bay, and small patch of IFR, northern Fognak Island, IFR from the southeast Bering across the western Alaska Peninsula, VFR from Nikolsky, but marginal spreading into Atka, IFR spreading eastward to Adak, extending back to Shemya and Attu Island, marginal VFR northward to St. Lawrence Island, IFR in the Bering Strait, and southeast coast, VFR, the exception being Prince of Wales Island, maybe over to Ketchikan, or actually Annette and Metlakatla, being marginal. And in the afternoon, that pulls back to right along the coastline, Prince of Wales Island. Good VFR, though, for the Panhandle, North Gulf Coast, Bristol Bay northward, all the interior, North Slope, Arctic coast, areas of marginal VFR. Chuck CC through the Bering Strait looks really good with the VFR, same for the Seward Peninsula. IFR, Yukon Delta Coast, Nunivak Island, Pribilof, St. Matthew Island, and IFR, narrowing band across Atka, but east of Adak now, and then more IFR for the western Aleutians. Sunday morning, mostly VFR in the interior, Brooks Range, or the North Slope again, eastern Arctic coast, areas of IFR, and now some patchy areas of marginal VFR possibly will show up over the mountainous terrain south of the Alaska Range, eastern North Gulf Coast, Panhandle VFR, IFR along the southwest coast from Togiak Bay up across Cape Nuanam, possibly Cape Romanzov, or just south of there, northern Bering Sea, band of IFR, marginal for the St. Lawrence Island area, maybe to Nome, and the Aleutians basically IFR, and some IFR south side of the Alaska Peninsula around Sand Point or so. And then IFR more extensive southern Alaska Peninsula for the afternoon. All the Aleutians look IFR, and the southern Bering Sea as well to the Pribilof. Just a narrow band of marginal VFR separating those two IFR zones, one of which the northern one will extend up, but not quite reaching the Bering Strait, but it'll cover much of the southwest coast. And for marginal VFR now increasing over the inland areas of southern Alaska, especially the Kuskokwim Valley, western Alaska Range, and maybe the Talkeetnas across the Copper River Basin, but looking VFR, Prince William Sound, Cook Inlet, northern Kodiak Island, Panhandle, IFR central Arctic coast. And for the afternoon, or passes, that was Sunday afternoon, passes Saturday, VFR for both Anatuvik and Adigan, western Alaska Range, passes wide open, Lake Clark, Merrill, Rainy, VFR, and windy VFR as well. Isabel, VFR, and Mentasta, VFR. In fact, all passes will be open tomorrow. We'll see VFR flying conditions on either approach, especially Portage, Chilkoot, and White. Freezing levels 2,000 feet up to Cape Lisborne, and then cutting east-southeastward to roughly around Eagle, there along the Yukon River, 6,000 feet west and near or just north of the Alaska Range there, southward Kodiak Island, about 6,000 feet as well along the Panhandle, 4,000 feet out over the Aleutians. And for the icing, areas of just the greatest potential in the shaded areas here, and mostly of the light to very isolated moderate Ryan type icing, could be mixed there across southern Alaska Range, Copper River Basin, maybe the Susitna Valley, if there's enough moisture, and then out over the western Aleutians, freezing level to 10,000 feet. Jet stream, upper level ridging continues over the Chukchi, and that putting a northeast wind at 33,000 feet out of the northeast at about 60 knots there for the central Arctic coast areas. Coming around that weak upper level low over the Mackenzie River Delta. Pacific jet south of the forecast area, although coming quite close on southwest winds ahead of that Aleutian low, about 150 knots. 9,000 feet, high pressure, light wind, southern Alaska and the Panhandle, as well as the Gulf, north to northeast, a little breezy for the North Slope Arctic coast. Southerlies at 40 knots over the central Aleutians. 3,040 knot winds showing up here over the Queen Charlotte, south of the Panhandle, low for light variable winds there and across all of southern Alaska. And then south to southeast, about 40 knots over the southwest Bering and the central Aleutians. Turbulence, light to isolated moderate chop, central western Aleutians, as well as the Eagle area and maybe the northwest coast.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, joined again by Eric Stevens from the GINA, or Geographic Information Network of Alaska at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Thanks for joining us again, Eric.
Glad to be here.
Thanks. We are talking about satellites today, and what are satellites? And the easy way to talk about that would be to introduce our friend the globe here, which is a round spheroid type shape. We haven't been on a flat Earth as far as history is known for several hundred years now, and because of that we also know that we are orbiting around other objects in space and that objects are orbiting around the Earth as well. We call all those things satellites in some form or fashion, right, Eric?
Right. Well, this leads to the discussion of Johannes Kepler's research 400 years ago. Did some of the early work and founded the 3 laws of planetary motion, which are important to planets and also to weather satellites.
Okay.
Kepler's first law talks about how the orbit of an object around another object is an ellipse, not necessarily a circle.
Kind of a flattened circle?
Yeah, depending on how flat so it could be.
Okay.
For our purposes, we'll just say they're mostly circular.
Okay.
The second law is most important for us, though, and that is the closer an object is to the thing it's orbiting, the faster it goes. So in the solar system, the planet Mercury is the closest planet to the sun. It orbits the sun in 88 days. It moves at 100,000 kilometers an hour.
It's a lot different than Earth.
Moving.
Okay.
Right. And further out from the Earth is Jupiter, and it moves at only 1/4 the speed of Mercury, and it has to go further, so it takes 12 of our years for Jupiter to make one lap. The further out you are, the slower you go.
Okay.
So we're talking about planets. What does it have to do with weather satellites? Turns out Kepler's laws apply to planets orbiting the sun. They also apply to satellites orbiting the Earth.
Okay.
You know, our natural satellite is the moon. There's the famous Apollo 8 Earthrise shot.
Beautiful shot.
Oh, yeah, you could just talk about that forever. December 1968, the moon is about 250,000 miles away from the Earth.
Okay.
It takes a month to go around the Earth. It's that far out, it takes a full month to do an orbit. Another shot here of the International Space Station. Instead of being 250,000 miles out, the ISS is only 250 miles up. It's really close. And so it doesn't take a full month for the space station to go around the Earth. It only takes 90 minutes. It's so close, it just whips right around 90 minutes.
Okay.
So weather satellites, there are a number of weather satellites and there are a number of orbits. The further out you have the satellite, the longer it takes to go around the Earth. And this is important because different satellites have different purposes. So we have a satellite here. This little salt shaker lid will serve as our satellite going around the Earth. Let's say you have a satellite that's 22,000 miles above the Earth. This is kind of a magical spot because at that distance, it takes a full day for the satellite to go around the Earth. Imagine if you put your satellite 22,000 miles up from the equator and had it go with the Earth as the Earth spun.
The same speed.
Right. The satellite goes around the Earth just as fast as the Earth itself is turning. In effect, the satellite will hover in one spot.
I see.
And it appears when you make a movie loop of picture after picture after picture, you can replay that and you get these movie loops. Geostationary satellites, these are called, because they're stationary in appearance, and they provide a constant frame of reference. We've got an example here. Another nice thing about these satellites, since they're that far out at 22,000 miles, you can see from pole to pole, which is nice. So they're pretty broad view and a constant frame of reference.
So those are the pictures that if you're watching a weather satellite loop on TV, your favorite weather show, that's the picture that you're going to see is one that's sitting over the same spot.
If you're seeing a movie loop play again and again, that came from geostationary satellites. That's the only way you can do that.
Yeah.
The bummer, though, for us in Alaska is we're up on the very top of the planet. And for geostationary satellites to work, they have to be over the equator. So for the geostationary bird to view Alaska, it's kind of like reading a book, but you're reading it edge on like that.
Right.
So there's another kind of orbit called the polar orbit,
Okay.
which is nice. We're near the pole.
Yeah.
And here's a satellite. Those polar orbiters are much closer to the Earth, getting down toward International Space Station elevation. And they're not in the equatorial plane. Rather, their orbital plane is inclined like this. And the Earth turns under that satellite as the satellite orbits. The nice thing about that is for Alaska, the satellite will go right over Alaska a few times a day. And so you get a much closer image. We've got a shot from the Sumi NPP satellite. Specifically, it's a true color image from the VIRS sensor. That's an acronym there.
Okay.
But it's a beautiful shot of Alaska, and you can see so much detail. The kind of detail, because you're close in,
Very high resolution.
you couldn't get this kind of view from geostationary satellites. The advantage of these polar orbiters is nice close imagery. You can see a lot of detail. The disadvantage, though, is that the satellite flies by,
Right.
and then you have to wait a while to get the next image. And if geostationary weaknesses are that you're reading the page like that, the polar orbiter, you're reading the page straight on, but it's so close, and then it zips by, and you have to wait for the satellite to come around the Earth again. So there's no one perfect solution. Different satellites for different orbits, each has their strength, and amazingly, it all comes back to Johannes Kepler and his laws of planetary motion. The same laws that govern how the planets orbit the sun, they govern how the satellites orbit the Earth, and even our little pretend salt shaker right here.
Right. Okay. Well, since the 1957 Sputnik, we've been putting man-made objects into orbit around the Earth and starting to get pictures back. Who knows what will happen in the next 50 to 100 years?
Oh,
Amazing
it's
stuff.
a growing science, and the future is bright.
Thank you so much for joining us again, Eric. And for more information on Dehne and what the satellite systems do there and what Eric's been talking about today, you can go to the web address on your screen. For Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Okay, welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis, virtually gone there south of Nunivak Island, and not too much even north of Nunivak Island, but does pick up again around St. Lawrence Island. Just kind of a thin area, less than 8% concentration along the Yukon Delta coast, and then still that heavier area over western Norton Sound. And for the southeast coast marine forecast, wind-wise, on the outer coastline, north to northeast 20 knots, 9 to 11 foot seas, lighter winds up north on the north coast northwesterly at 10 to 15, seas 6 to 7 feet. Light variable winds over the inside waters, 5 to 10 knots, and seas 2 feet or less. Outlook for Sunday, small craft advisory, central and south coast, northwest 25 knots, 7 to 8 foot seas, and west-northwest winds on the north coast, 15 to 20 knots, seas 7 feet. And for Lynn Canal, northwest, 15, 3-foot seas, central southern inside waters, variable to northwest at 10 with seas being slight. Prince William Sound, westerlies are variable to west, light winds, 10 knots or less, seas 2 feet. And west-southwest, 15 knots for the North Gulf Coast, seas 6 feet. Light winds for the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay out of the west, and for Cook Inlet, south to southwest winds, especially in the afternoon at about 15 knots with 3-foot seas. And for Sunday, Cook Inlet, even lighter winds south to southwest at 10 knots with 2-foot seas, southwest 10 for Prince William Sound, and the North Gulf Coast, southwest winds 15 to 20 knots, 6 to 7-foot seas. Same thing for the Barren Islands, southwesterlies at 20 knots. Kodiak Island, northeast 15 to 20 knots, strongest on the east side of the island with seas as high as 9 feet on the Pacific side, but just 3 feet for Shelikof Strait. East-northeast winds 15 knots for the Alaska Peninsula on the Pacific side of the peninsula, 8 to 10-foot seas there. Variable winds at 10 knots for the Bristol Bay area and the north side of the Bering Strait, or the Alaska Peninsula. And then for Sunday, small craft advisories at front drives eastward will bring east to southeast winds 25 to 30 knots with seas 5 to 9 feet. And for Bristol Bay, pick up the winds to 20 knots throughout the day, seas 4 feet. And Castle Cape to Sitkinak, southeast 20, southwest 20 Shelikof Strait, southerlies 20 on the east side of Kodiak Island. Moving out west to the Aleutians, On Alaska Island tomorrow, southeast 15 knots. Umack Island, southeast 25 knots. Adak and Atka, east-southeast 30 knots, seas 7 to 10 feet. East winds at 30 knots from Adak to Kiska, Kiska to Shemya. Gales northeast 35 knots, seas 12 feet. And then for Sunday, for the western Aleutians, north 25 with 7 to 9 foot seas, Adak and Atka, southeast to northeast 25 to 30 knots. And the eastern Aleutians, east-southeast winds at 30 with seas 7 to 11 feet. For the Norton Sound area tomorrow, light winds out of the northeast at 10 knots. St. Lawrence Island, though, north at 25. Small craft advisories there, seas at 4 feet. Elsewhere, variable winds 10 to 15 knots with 2 to 4 foot seas. Moving ahead to Sunday, Pribilofs, east winds increasing to 30 knots, even stronger for St. George Island. Higher gusts there, 8 foot seas. North 25, so small craft advisories continue. St. Lawrence Island. And northeast 15 for the Yukon Delta coast, pick up to about 20 knots for St. Matthew Island. And for Saturday, tomorrow for the eastern Boulevard Sea coast, light northerly winds at about 10 knots, northeast at 10 on the central coast, west side, northeast 15, Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, northeast 25, small craft advisories there, and then northerlies at 20 from Cape Thompson to Wales. And for Sunday, Wales to Cape Thompson, northeast 20 knots, small craft advisories for Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort. For northeast winds at 25, western Arctic coast northeast at 20, but the central and eastern coastline northeast or east-northeast down to about 10 knots, winds staying light there. For tonight again, look for diminishing winds and flurries, fog, especially the eastern Boulevard Sea coast, but could extend westward there across the north slope to the western Brooks Range. Mostly fair over the interior, light winds all the way down, weak high pressure forms over Cook Inlet, and a chance of rain southern panhandle vanishes tomorrow. Front pushing rain eastward into the Aleutians. And for Sunday, that front brings wind and rain into the Alaska Peninsula, dry over the panhandle, and a chance of showers, mostly cloudy skies, southern Alaska. Thank you for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.